What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 5, which is the fifth and final part of Crisis on Infinite Earths, as well as the first episode of the Arrowverse ever to take place on Earth Prime, the new universe comprised of Earth 1, Earth 38, Black Lightning's universe, and potentially a couple others, but those are the three that are confirmed to be a part of this new Earth called Earth Prime. With that in mind, let's get right into the review, starting with Supergirl waking up in Earth Prime. So right off the bat, we see Supergirl or Kara wake up in the new Earth, and things are clearly different. This is something that I really enjoyed about this episode. This is something that made this episode maybe more enjoyable, or at least more fun than previous episodes in this crossover. I would say this is the most fun episode of the crossover. It isn't necessarily the best, as there are things I don't love, and it doesn't really have very many emotional moments and things like that, but it is, I think, the most fun, potentially the most enjoyable episode of the crossover. And all these moments of certain characters. First of all, you have Kara realizing things that are different because there's this new multiverse and the new Earth, and her universe is on the same universe as Earth 1. The biggest change that we could clearly tell happened to Earth 38, the biggest retcon, and other than it being on Earth 1, obviously, or other than being on the same universe, is the fact that Lex Luthor is considered a hero, and he also owns the DEO. He's also given a Nobel Peace Prize, all of which makes me honestly a little bit excited, or at least interested, in the rest of Supergirl Season 5, or just Supergirl as a whole, because like I said in Part 4 of my review for Part 4, the rivalry between Supergirl and Lex Luthor is actually pretty great, and it's pretty clear we're going to see more of that going forward in this new context where Lex Luthor is considered a hero. He basically got what he wanted, which is to be considered a hero. The next thing he wants is to kill Kryptonians, so I'm guessing that's going to be his main motivation going forward, and I'm definitely very much interested to see that in Supergirl, but also potentially in Superman and Lois. But after that, we learn the actual biggest change to the universe, where Supergirl goes to fight Weather Witch, who is now on the very same universe that she is. Flash shows up to help her, and this is when we get a scene where Marv Wolfman shows up. Marv Wolfman, if you don't know, wrote the original Crisis on Infinite Earths comic book. He created the Monitor, the Anti-Monitor, Harbinger, Pariah. Also in Crisis on Infinite Earths, Guy Gardner and Dr. Light. And outside of that, characters like Deathstroke, Cyborg, Raven, Starfire, Nightwing's Identity, and a lot of DC characters were created by this guy, Marv Wolfman. And one thing, or two big things that he did in Crisis on Infinite Earths was kill two very large characters. Those characters are the Flash and Supergirl. And what do you know? The characters who he's asking an autograph from is the Flash and Supergirl, which is, I thought, a really fun detail that they had there. The next character we see in the new Earth, or just to realize that they're on a new Earth, is Sarah, who goes to find Ray Palmer, who then doesn't realize that, the whole crisis happened. He doesn't remember the crisis at all, and this is something that I did assume they would be doing, that only the Paragons would remember, but they did kind of fix that. They changed that, as John Jones was just able to remind everyone telepathically about the crisis, or, implant memories, basically, through Martian Manhunter, which is cool. I mean, it's interesting. It's basically only the heroes, only people who John Jones knows personally that would be able to remember anything about the crisis, and they use John as a paragon for that potentially, and that's, I think, pretty interesting. But then Sarah goes to the bunker, and we learn also that John reminded Diggle, Renee, and also Dinah about the crisis, and they reflect on Oliver's death, which is a pretty good scene. It's not exactly as emotional as I would have hoped, but like I said, this episode is low on the emotion, unlike episode, let's say, 1 and episode 4, and pretty high on the fun, and also, Easter eggs and fan service. But this scene right here, it's really just a whole storyline of a couple scenes of characters being on the new Earth, realizing where they are, and realizing the changes, and also Martian Manhunter reminding them, which, like I said, is really fun. I really enjoyed it, but also there isn't really much to talk about there, since it's basically the same thing over and over again. John also goes to Star Labs to remind Caitlin about the crisis, and also remind Nash about the crisis. A scene that I did like. John is very clearly very angry about what Nash did, since Nash released the Anti-Monitor, although it was more Mar-Novu who was really responsible for all of this, or at least indirectly responsible. But John clearly very angry at Nash, and I like this scene a lot because of the sudden change from Nash being all cocky and his previous personality to the switch to becoming Pariah, because realizing what he did. However, right after that switch, the next time we see him, they revert back to the pre-crisis personality, which is something I didn't like. In the scene where he went from his cocky attitude to being responsible for all of this, knowing that he was responsible. It's a great scene, very well acted from Tom Cavanaugh, how he was able to switch like that, but then, for no reason whatsoever, he just goes back to his cocky personality, his pre-crisis personality, and I really didn't like that because the weight of the multiverse, the weight of everything being doomed because of him, and the Antimonitor being released because of him was such a great character moment, character development for Nash, and it's such an interesting concept. And while they did that for part 1 and 3, and also for one scene here, I don't know why they just reverted back to his pre-crisis personality, and that's really one of the more disappointing things about this episode while watching it, and like what we see from Nash later. This is when we see the Justice League face off against Bebo and this guy named Sagon, or whatever his name was. I don't think he's a DC character, but it was definitely, like I said, a very, 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 very fun scene. Seeing the Justice League team up for the first time, or at least like the Earth Prime characters teaming up for the first time on Earth Prime, now that they're on the same universe, it's definitely a lot of fun. However, I will say that I think this was a waste of like a allocation of resources that they should not have done. Bebo looked like it cost a bit of money, and while I'm sure a lot of people are excited that Bebo's here, this is money that either could have went to John Jones being Martian Manhunter for longer, or maybe better looking fight scenes later. I'm not going to say the fight scenes later look bad necessarily. In fact, they don't, especially on the budget they have, but it just doesn't make any sense to me that they put money into Bebo, this CGI creature, when instead they could have just not done that, and nobody would have like realized whatsoever, and instead put that into making the other shot that looked like they're very CGI heavy look better, or maybe making John Jones be in his Martian form for longer than just like a couple minutes in this episode. So while I think this Justice League versus Bebo fight was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it, I really don't think they should have done it, and I think they should have done the same exact thing, but with just not a CGI creature. After that, Nash tells the Justice League, who really the only people in the room were Team Arrow at that point, but he tells them that the Anti-Monitor is back, and I gotta say right now, while I do really like the Anti-Monitor fight later, I think it's weird what they did here. They defeated the Anti-Monitor, took the Spectre to defeat him, but then not only is he back, they defeated him fairly easily. All they had to do was shrink him, which I'll get to that later, but this is another thing I really do have a problem with this episode. I didn't even realize while watching, because again, it was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed watching the episode, but it's kind of weird that they had this whole storyline of showing that the Anti-Monitor is so powerful it takes the Spectre and the 7 Paragons to defeat him, and here it's just the Atom throwing a shrinking device at him that defeats him. Maybe he's less powerful here, maybe there's something like that going on, but it's just really weird to me that they did that, as this episode also kind of felt like a epilogue, and I said in my part 4 review that I don't think Reverse Flash could have fit anywhere into this crossover, but looking at it now, this episode probably could have just done with a Reverse Flash instead of Anti-Monitor, since Anti-Monitor just felt like he was defeated way too easily in this episode compared to the last one, where it took the Spectre, who's supposed to be like the most powerful hero in the entire multiverse, and instead they could just shrink him forever. That's something I didn't really like about this episode. Again, there's a couple things I didn't like, even though I really enjoyed it, and it's still one of the best crossover episodes ever, and it's definitely better than, let's say, part 2, but there are a lot of issues with this episode that really, I think, drag it down a bit. Then there's a scene of Barry and Sarah reflecting on Oliver's death, which is a scene I really like. It made me realize also that Sarah and Barry got a good amount of screen time together that I really did not expect. Not only did I expect it, but also I don't think they've ever gotten this much screen time together before, as Sarah's been more of an Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow character, while the Flash has been fairly separate from her, which was enjoyable, but also I definitely would have preferred if the entire time Barry got more screen time with Supergirl and obviously the Green Arrow, as opposed to the scenes he got with White Canary, especially with Green Arrow, since this is his last crossover, and they have just great chemistry as friends and allies. But anyway, I do definitely like this scene quite a lot. Then we get the team-up shot where the Justice League charges at the Shadow Demons. I said this in my trailer breakdown, so I'm not really going to go into detail on it as much as I maybe would have, but this is underwhelming. It's only 10 heroes, and it's less than Crisis on Earth X, and also just not as well formatted as, let's say, Invasion. They're all in a row. It's only 10 heroes, and it's pretty disappointing, considering Crisis on Infinite Earths could have been huge. It was huge, and they had all these heroes, and yet there's just really 10 heroes for the team-up shot, which I guess they did say there wasn't really going to be that big of a team-up shot, so I guess my expectations shouldn't have been that high, but either way, I'm pretty disappointed with this one. In this fight, like I said, like the rest of the episode basically, is so much fun. Obviously, there are things that I would change. I would add more heroes. The fact that they had Black Canary there and they didn't use her, they just used her in the background. This would be the Dinah Drake version of Black Canary. It's a little bit weird, and also there are other heroes I would add. And also, I would give Diggle a Green Lantern ring, and I would say that's also something that never happened. That's pretty disappointing, unless it happens in the series finale of Arrow, which is not only, I think, something that might happen, but also, I would say likely, since David Ramsey did say that he got the ending he would want for his character. But other than those things, getting all those things out of the way, I definitely thought this fight scene was not only a lot of fun, but looks really great, especially on the CW's budget, which I feel like I've been saying a lot in this crossover. It just feels like they kind of put a lot of budget into this, a lot more than the CW typically has, and it looks a lot better than it basically has any right to look for the most part. But this fight scene, it's a lot of fun. The heroes charge at the Shadow Demons. They fight for like a second, but then the Shadow Demons disappear and then form together into the Anti-Monitor, which might signify that he is indeed weaker here, maybe weaker than at the dawn of time, maybe weaker because the multiverse has been restored and the antimatter universe is weak, but also it might show that he is only capable of being the Anti-Monitor as long as the Shadow Demons come together to form him. So again, yeah, it might signify that he is indeed weaker, which he would be if the multiverse is back and the antimatter universe is weaker. But the Justice League fight the Anti-Monitor for a bit, which again looks great, and they get blown back and the Anti-Monitor grows big, which I gotta say, this is one thing that I really enjoyed watching in this episode. Again, with like the rest of the episode, the Anti-Monitor growing large, something that he never did before in the crossover, made him, I think, way more imposing and certainly more comic accurate, as in the comics, every time we saw him, he was really big. He was a lot bigger than the Monitor, a lot bigger than any other hero, I guess except for the Spectre in this one image, but this was great. I don't know how they pulled this off. It looked very good. The CGI was amazing, and seeing like the Superman, Supergirl, and Martian Manhunter, who by the way is in his Martian form, all fighting the Anti-Monitor while the other heroes are fighting, I guess, Shadow Demons. It was just a lot of fun. And again, I don't love how they ended up finally defeating the Anti-Monitor by shrinking him forever, and also the line where Adam tells Supergirl to throw like a girl and Supergirl says, "I always do," was pretty cringy. Other than those things, and also a couple other things, again, I do think this is fun, has flaws, but is certainly fun. This is definitely a very enjoyable fight scene, and a very well done fight scene, especially with the budget they have on the CW. Honestly, I don't know how they managed to pull this off, and make it look better than any Justice League movie ever has. There only ever has been one, but I mean, compare the Anti-Monitor here with Steppenwolf, let's say, in Justice League, or even like Ares and Wonder Woman. It's insane the budgetary difference and how much better they make it look here, and just it shows how much more effort they really put into these crossovers, at least this one, than the movies, which is just insane to me. From here on out until we get to the Justice League stuff, and this is after the final fight, there's basically a montage of showing how things are different in the new universe in Earth Prime, as well as the new multiverse. First, we learn that Sarah Diggle, the daughter of Lila and John, who was erased from existence due to Flashpoint, has been retconned back, and now John Diggle Jr. has I'm guessing a twin sister, Sarah Diggle, which means that Flashpoint is at this point even less significant than it originally was, because basically every change that ever happened because of Flashpoint is either retconned into being changed to happen because of something else, or here, retconned back. I guess creating John Diggle Jr. was something they did that was pretty big, but that was a pretty cool retcon that they did there. Another one is that Superman, instead of having just one son, Jonathan Kent, he has two, Jonathan Kent and one other son who we don't know his name yet, which is pretty insane. Like, we were just introduced to Jonathan Kent, and then they throw in another son of Superman and Lois, which I'm guessing disproves the theory that the casting calls for the two teenage boys for Superman and Lois was not for Superboy and Robin, Damian Wayne, and then they're going to show the Super Sons. Instead, it was for the two Superboys, and, this is weird. They've never done anything like this with any Superman ever, but I'm interested to see where they take this. One thing that was weird to me was Superman's reaction. Like, he didn't know he had two sons. Like, what were they trying to convey? That when John telepathically reminded him of the crisis, he forgot his current life, he forgot everything about the current Earth, so then he was confused about his other sons, his other son. It was really weird, his reaction there. Like, I don't really understand what they were trying to show. Like, Superman was basically the audience. He, along with the audience, was surprised that he has another son, even though I'm pretty sure he should already know about his other son. But anyway, that's another retcon they put in there. And there's this narration from Oliver, which this whole thing, all these cameos, I will probably make another video about it, going into detail about all these things, all these cameos, how the multiverse is different. But I will say that this was pretty awesome. Like, this whole sequence of events was just as cool, maybe even cooler than the one in the beginning, like the one that's very similar. Like, in the beginning, there was like an infinite multitude or whatever they say, and here it's Oliver instead of the Monitor, maybe implying that Oliver is still alive, but either way, this one was just as cool as the original one. Maybe like not as fun. Like, the Burt Ward cameo was just awesome. This one was more surprising, got me excited for certain things, and again, I'll probably talk about it even more in a separate video. And the rest of the episode, like the last couple minutes, are just Justice League awesomeness. It's confirmed that Earth 1, Earth 38, and Black Lightning's universe combined into Earth Prime, along with maybe a couple others, which again I'll get to in a separate video, like when I talk about the cameos. But we know that it is called Earth Prime, which is pretty awesome. Earth Prime is the current DC universe, the one after Flashpoint happened. It created Earth. The multiverse, and the main one we follow is not Earth 1. That's a separate one. That's an unusual one. This one, the main one, is Earth Prime, so that I think is certainly pretty cool. And the scene, Kara, Barry, and Sarah honoring Oliver's sacrifice, pretty awesome. The fact that he's basically like the catalyst for the creation of the Justice League is pretty awesome as well. And speaking of the Justice League, now, Mark Guggenheim did say they're not allowed to call them the Justice League, which is so weird to me. Just call them the Justice League. You even have a cameo from Ezra Miller in the last episode. People clearly know this is not the same universe, and nobody's going to confuse them. But even though they're not allowed to call them the Justice League, this is the Justice League for all intents and purposes. I mean, there are 7 DC heroes, 3 of whom are founding members of the Justice League. That's the Flash, Superman, and Martian Manhunter. Another 2 of whom, Supergirl and Black Lightning, are pretty prominent members of the Justice League in the comics. And Batwoman is an occasional member of the Justice League in some continuities. There's only really White Canary, who is very odd to be a member of the Justice League, but even though this is a very unconventional, like 7 members, founding members, you got no Aquaman, Green Lantern, Batman, and Wonder Woman, it's still really, really awesome that they're finally forming the Justice League, even though they never really called them the Justice League. And the episode ends with Gleek escaping somebody who, honestly, I'll be honest here, had no idea who that was until I looked it up, and learned it was the Wonder Twins monkey, which is either just a reference to the Super Friends TV show, since the Hall of Justice, the round table with the logos, is all from the Super Friends TV show, I'm pretty sure. Maybe that's just a reference there, since Gleek and the Wonder Twins were original characters in the Super Friends, but also they can't just introduce Gleek and not have that be a setup for the Wonder Twins, so maybe the Wonder Twins will be getting their own CW show, which honestly I wouldn't be opposed to. I'm not fans of the Wonder Twins necessarily at all. In fact, I had no idea who Gleek was, but honestly, I think it could be cool for them to give in some sort of spotlight and a CW show. Or maybe the Wonder Twins could appear in some sort of TV show, The Legends, Black Lightning, Supergirl, The Flash, one of those I definitely think could be interesting. But that's the end of this video, not this video, but that's the end of basically the review and recap of the video. But then what's my overall opinion? This episode is just so much fun. It's like from the start all the way to the end. My face, I was just grinning from cheek to cheek. It was so much fun. I did cringe a couple times, a couple things I didn't really like, and a couple things that really bothered me. But for the most part, while this is certainly nowhere near the best episode of this crossover, in fact, I would say it's the second worst. It's still so much fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I love the status quo changes that they made. With that in mind, I'll give this episode a 9.5 out of 10, and I will say say it's probably the best episode of Legends of Tomorrow ever. And with that in mind, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.